Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats, and I hope we can proceed with our conference. I know it is always a problem to start after lunch, because once you have eaten food and your stomach starts digesting it, it's difficult to organize people and force them to come down and listen to the panel. Okay? Now, I will, as one of the organizers, I would like to inform you of some practicalities, meaning by now just running a bit late, because the lunch and we start late in the morning. So we'll have this panel moderated by Dr. running until 3:15, okay? 3:15, just over an hour. And then we'll have a small break and then proceed to the second panel, and the coffee break is planned for 4:30 now, okay, so approximately. So I will now give the floor to our next panel in the round, and please, Dr. Friedrich, you can start the panel.
Yeah, thanks, Maxime. Maxime already indicated that sessions after lunch are always a little tricky, because I once heard that there's a technical term for that. It's called post-digestive amnesia. What hits people at conferences at this point in time. So I hope you'll be staying with us. Otherwise, we'll have to think of some innovative performance here to keep you awake. We had a focus, very interestingly and just quietly so, on Ukraine all morning. We're now shifting our perspective slightly to neighboring countries. From my own experience over the last year, I know that this is not the easiest to do. My sort of primary day job is to work on Belarus, and for the last year, with the Ukraine crisis going on and evolving, I find it very difficult to concentrate at times on Belarus. So I hope we'll sort of step out of that difficulty here a little bit and manage. I also think that this is a sort of debate that is, or an additional sort of perspective that we're trying to bring in here, that is for a number of reasons quite important, I find. One is, and I'm saying this also because the two organizers of this event are two academic institutions. Most of you will know that there's always this tension in sort of academic fields and research between comparativists and those who do sort of country and area studies. The ones basically say everything can be confirmed, and I count myself among them. The others say, no, this country, that region, this culture is so specific, you have to sort of find different approaches here. So I think this discussion here can also be a bit of a check as to what the kind of comparisons are between countries of the Eastern neighborhood that are valid and where country specificities also relate to comparisons. The second is that, and that relates to the first point, is that most of you will know that there's quite a discussion about EU policy in Eastern Europe and in the Eastern neighborhood now. And a lot of that revolves around criticism of the Eastern Partnership. The Eastern Partnership has often been criticized for taking overly regional approach, not differentiating enough among the countries of the region, and therefore also not providing for sort of country-specific and tailor-made approaches sufficiently. And that, again, is basically a matter of how sort of how much of a comparison and commonality do you allow across a region, how much country-specific an approach do you develop. So here again, I think this sort of perspective across the borders of Ukraine to the north and southwest may be informative. The last point is an obvious one, and is the developments here in Ukraine have an obvious impact on other countries of the Eastern neighborhood. They will sort of determine their choices politically. They already have fallout politically, economically, and socially. So here again, I think a bit of a fact check as to what the reverberations are of developments here in Ukraine across the borders. This should be very interesting. The two levels that I think we will be necessarily approaching this on is one, obviously, with a bit of a broader view as to the impact of developments in Ukraine on neighbors. And the second level then sort of returns a little bit to the discussion, especially on civil society that we have this morning. And for this discussion, which we can keep open and pre-structure this overly, we have two very experienced and nice guests from Moldova and Belarus. For that reason, I guess our discussion will also primarily revolve around these two countries, but that obviously shouldn't prevent any of you also to ask questions that may relate to other countries that are neighboring Ukraine. Alina and Andrei are both Germans by background, so again, perhaps a slightly different perspective that we may receive than if both of them were pure NGO activists. I mean, at least Alina, I know, is also involved in civil society, in the media, NGO. In the circumstances of Belarus, I would say that there's hardly a dividing line between the independent media and civil society. So I think all of this will blend in very well. We'll start with Andrei, who, despite his very young age, is the editor-in-chief of effectively the oldest Belarusian newspaper, NaUKMA, which I believe has a history going like over a century by now. And which remains one of the very few independent newspapers that's here in Belarus. Take it away on Belarus.
points about the Belarusian situation, and then I will try to draw some conclusions about the future of the civil society in Belarus and the priorities for the civil society. First point, during the last year crisis, I often asked myself what was Belarus like if you compare it to Ukrainian regions. Of course, Belarus is not like Lviv. The national identity is weak. Soviets and Lukashenko destroyed the national language and pride. Is Belarus like Kyiv? Are its citizens ready to change and want to be closer to Europe? So soon. Of course, Belarus is not a Crimea. Neither it is a Donbass with its strong sense of regional particularity. Maybe one can compare Belarus to Kharkiv. Odd and even evil forces dominated there, and the connections with Russia are quite strong. Still, Kharkiv remained Ukrainian, and it was due both to the activism of civil society, to the self-sacrifice of nationalists, and not the least, it was due to some kind of compromise with the old regime elites about Ukrainian independence and status quo. Yet the truly correct response to my first point is that Ukraine is unique, both in terms of size and configuration. Belarus is much smaller, and I would say it is much simpler. Will Maidan take place in Belarus in 2015? No, it will not. The events will go differently. Second important point. Russia made Ukraine pay a huge price for changes. While the West, in our Belarusian, helped Ukraine during the aggression. And that will have a strong impact on Belarus, both on Lukashenko and on the civil society. The opinion that Belarus is a legitimate sphere of Russian influence is destructive. Lukashenko did not align with Russia on Ukraine during war. It is a very positive fact for us and for Ukraine too. But this fact should not cause illusions. Belarus is still with Russia in all the basic principal things. It voted with Russia in the United Nations, but what is more important, it is in the military union with Russia. And there are many reasons to think that the consolidation of militarism in Russia will lead to similar tendencies in Belarus, like the hardening of Soviet policies in Moscow led to the frosts in Czechoslovakia and other Soviet satellites 50 years ago. Ex-Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, Andrius Ažubalis, said that Lukashenko is like a dove, like a pigeon. He is beautiful and he flies. But once the master gives a whistle to him, he returns to the dovecote. So the non-alignment on Ukraine, while it is positive, does not change anything for us inside the country, for the state of civil society. The system and rules of game inside Belarus did not change. And I doubt that a possible and an eventual turn in the attitude of the West to Lukashenko regime will decrease the repressivity of this regime toward the civil society. To the contrary, it may increase the pressure on the civil society. But you have a space for opposition in this system. It's clear. Third important point. What can influence changes in Belarus? Let us see the structure of Belarus economy. Belarus is more dependent on oil prices than oil exporting countries. Belarus maybe is the most oil prices dependent country in the world. Why is it so? Because Belarus has three sources of income. First, oil and oil products produced from Russian oil. This is potassium, Belaruskali, the prices of which often follow the oil prices. And three, machinery, equipment, and food products, which we export to Russia. If oil prices fall, the Russian demand will be down, is already down. So my country is totally dependent on oil prices, but Belarus does not have saving funds that which makes it reliant on Russian subsidies, which amount now to 12% of GDP in Belarus. 12% of GDP is a tremendous amount. It is like if Ukraine got $20 billion every year in gift, not in loans, in gift. So my third point is that the Russian economy downturn will have a major influence on Belarus. And some conclusions of what all this is likely to mean for the civil society. First, media freedom will be restricted even more, I think. So the media inside the country and bloggers will need more support and solidarity. Second point, the repressivity will likely increase during the next year, because the next year is the year of the presidential election in Belarus. And after the election, like it has already happened in Azerbaijan. And that means that the human rights defenders and solidarity funds must be supported. And the last point, the most important point, or the most optimistic point, if we return to Ukraine, Ukraine had problems in the regions where national identity was the weakest. Belarus is in the same trap. The consolidation of the national identity is the natural center of civil society and media efforts in Belarus. And what makes me upbeat is that the Lukashenkists admit as well the need in the national identity consolidation. They just wanted to be careful and apolitical. And here you have at least a bit of consensus inside the country, which is important to build our strategies. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andrei. This is obviously not a very upbeat picture that you provided us with. I do have to say that there were at least two elements that I was attaining very quickly. The one was the odd and evil forces from Kyiv. Perhaps we could later on have a brief exchange with our colleague from Kyiv about those odd and evil forces. The other one is obviously the beauty of Mr. Lukashenko that you mentioned, but that I wholeheartedly disagree with. Let me throw down one question at you right away, and that is, I think, a question that is very often asked these days, as especially also Western observers look at developments in Ukraine and Russian actions there, and that is the question whether or not a similar interference, whatever form it will take, by Russia is possible, likely, anytime soon. Because some of the elements that you mentioned are basically vulnerabilities that are easy to exploit. So perhaps you could sort of add on some thoughts on this particular question right away.
Russian interference is impossible while Alexander Lukashenko is president of Belarus, because it would be impossible to sell it to the internal public opinion why Russia interferes with the leader Russia has portrayed during 20 years as a friend, as a Slavic brother, etc., etc. But of course, Russia by intervening in Ukrainian Donbass, wanted to show to his allies that any geopolitical shift will lead to further Russian interference. So for the moment, the geopolitical shift is off the table in Belarus, also due to this threat. If you want, I can compare it to the, of course it's an exaggeration, and it's not a valuable comparison, but you can compare in some points to the situation of Finlandia during the period of so-called Finlandization after World War II, when the country did not dare to change the treaty of friendship and mutual with Russia. Of course, Finlandia, which was much more independent and much more ties with the West. Belarus is completely tied to Russia. But in a certain sense, Belarus now must wait for a change in the geopolitical context to make some shift in its policy.
Thanks a lot, Andrei. Obviously, and we'll come back to that, there's a lot that civil society can do while Belarus is in that waiting pattern. And obviously, I think one can only hope that that this waiting room will be, I mean, short on the one hand, but perhaps without interference that we see from the Russian side on the other. And with that, we shift to a country that I think is experiencing a lot of that Russian interference already, and that's Moldova. Most of you will have followed some of the events, especially in the last couple of weeks. The elections primarily. I think here again, this is a country where a lot of Western observers do expect stronger interference, but this is certainly best due to be assessed. Alina, with this paper, as well as signature.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I know it's a torture to speak after the lunch, but it's worse to listen. So I'm in a kind of better position now. But I'll be glad if we manage not only to listen and speak, but maybe to just to talk each to other. That's why I just prepared a few pictures. So it won't be an official presentation, but maybe to show to your eye a few symbols of what Moldova is now and what civil society is now. As about myself, I'm working as a journalist from my first at the college for 20 years from now. And believe me, it was hard to start a journalist career in Moldova in 80. And during 25 years, we really managed to change everything for journalists. We really managed to have better law, we really managed to have access to information, and I am now leading an investigative journalism group. And we really managed to write about corruption and to publish stories about how they steal money from public budget, what the businesses that politicians have. So it's really possible to change. I don't think that Moldova, being the smallest, the poorest, have to go back now. Moldova is going, I think, towards Europe. It is very hard because if Belarus with some with some machines and oils and everything, the population and better GDP, if they see like the president of Russia, we have nothing, but we have a bit of freedom. So I think we'll go further this way, being poor but having an idea where do we want to go. So, where is civil society now in Moldova? We just got ourselves between a very friendly EU union with a signed agreement which offers us a lot of opportunities to develop, and for a poor country is so important. But then we got just this Eastern war, which is very dangerous, very damaging, and Moldova has for 20 years or forever Russian army on its territory. This army is illegal, and all the promises signed by Russian Federation from 92 till now to withdraw this army from Transnistria were never solved. Moldova could never solve, but there are OECD, there are a lot of international organizations involved in these talks to withdraw the army, so it was never solved. So whenever any Russian army starts any operations in Ukraine or in Armenia or in Karabakh or everywhere, we are a bit concerned because during 22 years we never allowed to check what is with this Russian army in Transnistria, how many soldiers there are, how many bombs or how many anything. So it's just something you don't know and you are always scared about. But let's go to the situation now. In June 2014, Moldova signed this agreement with EU, starting a new cooperation with a very clear plan on what we can do further. The same day, it's not very easy to see, but I just made a copy of when you Google Moldova EU Association, you immediately see that just hundreds of articles in foreign media about how Russia banned the same day any export of Moldovan apples, Moldovan meat, Moldovan wine, Moldovan anything. Actually, we don't have too much, we have only vegetables and fruits and wines. So we got a long-term project with EU, and we got banned immediately any perspective to have any economical relations between we had for a while. And it was really very bad for this moment for agriculture enterprises and for simple people who are growing vegetables and grapes. If you could just go down. Putin sent the banks of Moldova back. And here you see a picture. We have in Moldova the biggest seller underground with wines in Europe. It is in Guinness Book, everybody knows. And Putin has there a special stand. There are his wines. He bought them and put and keeps in Moldova. I don't know why he thinks they are bad, but he still keeps, he bought, he spent money and he keeps them there. So that's why we can't trust him, because we understand when he speaks the truth. And but stopping imports from Moldova, he said Moldovan saddles are bad and Moldovan are bad. Russia still exports to Moldova a lot of things. And then Russia offers to us a lot of illicit money. We are not able now to know which this money are coming from and how they are spread between our Okay. Okay, I'll tell you. Now, a Moldovan citizen will see on his TV 28 Russian channels. And maybe it is not much, but Moldovan channels are only 9. So 28 to 9 is a huge proportion. And then we have only 3 Romanian, Moldova is between Romania and Ukraine, only 2 Ukrainian channels, and only 5 European. But those 5 European also are not in English or in French or in German. 2 of them only are in English, others are in Russian as well, translated to broadcasted in Moldova. So we have a huge amount of Russian channels. And if you look at the polls and the opinion polls, or maybe if you go to a Moldovan village and ask who is the most popular politician in your country, the answer will be Putin. Because they see Putin every day on all these channels. If you turn the channel, there is Putin again, Putin again, Putin again. So they think he is popular if he is on Moldovan TV or Moldovan screen. That's the problem for Moldovan population to understand really where they are and who are their leaders. The next problem for Moldovan public is Russian church. Every Moldovan village has a church that belongs to Russian Orthodox bishop. And each political campaign starts in the church. And every time we have elections, the church and the priest would have his invitation, and the church and the priest would say, vote for pro-Russian parties, we go to vote, the God said to us, the God will not punish us if we vote for Russia. So people who really trust, believe, and go to church understand that the God lives in Ukraine. And you see now on the picture Putin with the bishop, and the next picture is a Moldovan politician who Orthodox to the parliament with the same bishop. This campaign, but political campaign started for elections now. This politician appeared in the airport with a huge icon. He said, I'm just back from Kremlin with this icon. He started just to go through village to village, through church to church, and this was all the priests said, yes, you vote for him, he is a good representative of the God. This is the level of Moldovan republic. So this is the next. Then the same politician put as his political advertisement his billboards in Jena all around Europe. He is representing the party of socialists, but Putin accepted to have them for 5 minutes. They made a picture. So this was strange for educated people, but it was nothing strange for those who don't have education. Pieces of information from the church and from the billboards. Another surprising number of elections was this man. Without counting and without having any report, where do you have this money from? He just said, I'm coming from Moscow, and I am a politician, vote for me and take money. I give you money. So he paid everybody with everything. And he became as popular, he was take some 10% in the elections, but the last day before elections, the electoral committee decided that he did something illegal with this money, so he was withdrawn from the list of votes. And then it was a huge scandal, but after the society understood that we might have a huge problem with our freedoms, to allow anybody to be a candidate, to allow anybody to come and to give him the freedom to make a campaign, but then they don't get their obligations to explain who are you, why do you make this money, how much money, who do you pay, why. Then it's not a freedom, just it's a corruption on the laundering money. So after all this involvement in Russia, the results of voting in the 30th of November were like that, and the blue color represents votes offered to European pro-EU parties, and the red are regions who voted mostly for pro-Russian parties. And you see, we have like two Moldova. One Moldova voted for EU, and one Moldova voted for Russia. And the part that voted for Russia is quite big. It was about 40%, which is really very complicated for us. Of course, the pro-European won, and they have the majority now in the parliament. They have to create the government and to lead the parliament. But we, as civil society, got a huge problem. We have to communicate somehow with the whole Moldova. You can't just say, okay, we as civil society know that EU means development and transparency, and Russia means guns and conflicts and wars. It doesn't help. We have to do something else, and we have somehow to solve this problem. If you can go to the next. Then it was just yesterday, the day before published, Russia never sleeps. They have friendly politicians and parties in all the countries. This is from Business Insider. You may believe or not, but I myself met politicians in the EU Parliament who were saying Russia is doing very bad things and Europe should die. I mean, among the socialist parties and the left. But this is really, for us, it's a damaging process to see that European politicians are supporting Putin. My proposal to civil society is to learn from Putin, because he gives us some lessons. As you know, now in Russia, all foreign media is closed. And even Burda Modern or magazines that offer nothing political are requested to get out from Russia. So if Putin doesn't allow Moldovan metals, German magazines or Norwegian newspapers, and he considers they are not good for his population, why do we allow so much Russian propaganda that damages our